Hey gang, Private Jack here, and this is part 12 of my series on how to convert XNA models into models that can be used in Source FilmMaker. What we've done is we've found a model that we want to convert. It's in XNA format. We've loaded it up in LoRa and exported it to a format that is usable in Blender. We reboned, reshaped, resized, scaled, textured Ralph in Blender, and we've exported the Valve source model files that we're going to use to compile the model. And now what we have to do is we have to get the textures ready for use in Source FilmMaker. So we're going to use GIMP for that particular process. And we installed in part 2 a plugin for GIMP that will allow us to do this pretty easily. So load up GIMP, and if this is the first time you're going to load GIMP, it's going to take quite a while for GIMP to open. It has to go through and it has to register all its brushes, all its fonts, the scripts that it's using, and everything else. Mine loads up pretty quickly simply due to the fact that I've already run GIMP a couple of times now. For you, if you're running it for the first time, it could take up to 2 minutes to 10 minutes for it to load, depending on how fast your computer is. So with GIMP loaded, what we're going to do is we're going to go back into the XNA LoRa folder to where Ralph lives. So XNA XP or wherever you put XNA LoRa, data, Ralph, and here are the tag files that we used in our build of Ralph. I'm just going to sort these by type because it makes it easier for me to select them. And what I'm going to do is we use the eye, the hair, all three images for the hair and the body. And the reason why I say it that way is because I have to rename these files to the name that we used in Blender. So what we're going to do is we're just going to select these. So eyes, hair, and I'm holding down my shift key to select these. And I can do a multiple select, and all I have to do now is hold down the left mouse key and drag it into GIMP, and it will load all the images. Have a quick look at it. Click to layers, have a quick look at these. They're all single layered images. And here's an important thing to watch for is up here what the actual file sizes are. Now we'll get into that in a minute and why you need to know what those are. So what we're going to do now is we are going to create the actual place that Ralph is going to live for Source FilmMaker. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to open up Windows Explorer, and we are going to point to C, Program Files, x86 for our 64-bit guys, Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Source FilmMaker, Game, User Mod. And now we're going to go to the Models folder. If it doesn't exist in your folder tree, create it. And we're going to, in Models, we're going to create a folder called Ralph. So new folder Ralph. Now we're going to come back to User Mod again, and now we're going to go into Materials, Models, and if this path doesn't exist, Materials, Models, create it, new folder, and we're going to call this one Ralph. So the model will live in C, Program Files, x86 for our 64-bit guys, Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Source FilmMaker, Game, User Mod, Models, and the materials will live in C, program files, x86 for our 64-bit guys, Steam, Steam apps, common, source FilmMaker, game, user mod, materials, models, and here we've got our rel folder in both of those folder trees. We can exit out of Windows Explorer now, and we're going to run into a little bit of a problem here when we start exporting our image files to VTF format, and you'll see what that is in a second. So I'm going to start with the eyes, and I want to put this as a VTF into that materials folder that we just created. So I'm going to go File, Export, and I'm going to point this thing to that materials file, or folder. Main, oops. Why are you doing that to me? Okay. C, that's why. Program files. x86 for 64-bit guys. Steam. Steam apps. Common. Source FilmMaker. Now you'll see that I have two source FilmMaker files. One is a backup copy. Game. User mod. Materials. Models. And rel. Now to make this a VTF file, all I have to do is come up here and change the file extension to VTF. Hit export. And here is a problem that we have. What this is telling me is that the image file that I'm trying to create is not to the power of 2, and that the nearest widths and lengths for the file are 64 pixels or 128 pixels. So what I have to do is I have to come in here and I have to edit this tag of file. Just going to say OK here and cancel. I have to edit this, rescale this tag of file so that it is either 64-bit or 128-bit in size. If I look up here, what I'm going to find is what the actual size of that particular file is. Right now it's 84 by 84 pixels. So image, scale the image, and I think 64-bit is closer to, no, we'll take it up. We'll go to 128. So 128. And if this chain is broken, if these, let's look at it this way. Image, scale. This chain, what this means is that the sizes will stay relative to, the change will make the changes relative to the size that you put in here. So if this was 1024 and this was 256 and you change this one down to 512, this one would change to 1024. If I break the chain, these sizes are independent of each other. I want these to stay the same because the values are the same right now, and I'm going to change that to 128. So by changing that to 128, this changes to 128, and I scale it. So it's now the right size. Let's go through the rest of them. 256 by 256, that's a good size. And what the power of 2 is figure it out this way. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, 248, 4096, and up that way. So it has to be a number that is divisible by the power of 2. 256 is divisible by 2. 250 is not. by the power of 2, not by 2. And okay, so I'm going to rescale this one, and I'm going to change this to 256. My chain is connected, so both values will change relative to the change that I make. Click the scale button. Again, this one 2. Image scale 256. And this one is 1024 by 1024, which is up to the power of 2. Same with that one. And this one is 512 and 512, which is to the power of 2. So they'll convert no problem. We may end up with a little bit of a problem in the eyes, and we'll have to go back into Blender and do some rigmarole with it. But we'll carry this one through and see if the UVs are really affected. I don't think the eyes are going to make that much of a problem. So coming back to the eyes, now that we've got it scaled to the power of 2, we're going to do a File, Export, and it's important that we know what we named the material files in Blender when we rebuilt Ralph. So we're going to open up Blender, and what I usually do is I just drag a shortcut to my desktop. That's a shortcut there, so that I can start Blender quickly. File, open recent, open Ralph. Okay. Actually, let's see if we can fix this up right now before we even go any further. So what we're going to do is we're going to kill that one off. We're going to go back into the materials for the eyes. Go into the textures. We're going to go into the materials, and we're going to reopen that file. So materials, we're going to exit that, open XNA Laura, that one, iTaga, we've got that loaded. We're going to now iTaga, and it stayed pretty much the same. We could rescale this and make his eyes a little bit smaller. Move the cursor to the image. Cursor selected. Scale. We don't want to pull it off. I think that's fine. Okay, because we've made a change to the actual file, what we have to do now is we have to go back and we have to export these models again. So click on the Scene tab, come down here, and the only one that we no, we should export them all, I guess. This should be fine. That up, SMDs, export. 5 exported. The SMDs are resaved. Now, it's important that we know what we named the materials for each of the parts of the body, because that's what we have to call these things when we convert them. So the eyes, we come back over here to the materials tab, and we called that eyes. So when we save this, when we export it, we're going to go to C, Program Files, x86 for 64-bit guys, Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Source FilmMaker, Game, User Mod, Materials, Models, Ralph. We're going to change this file name to eyes.vtf and export it. This is the interface for creating the VTF. What we're going to do is we're going to add an alpha channel, and we're just going to leave everything else the same. If you want to learn more about VTFs, go to the Steam developer website and look up VTF. Say OK. Okay, next texture we have is the hair. And if we come in here and we find hair, we found out that we named the material hair. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this File, Export. And now that you've used that path for the first time, you can actually come in here to Recently Used now and click on Ralph, and it should take you to your C program files, x86 for a 64-bit guys, Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Source Filmmaker, Game, User Mod, Materials, Models, Ralph. And we're going to call this one hair.vtf. And export it. Add the alpha channel and say OK. Now for the bump, what we're going to do is we're going to call that one hair bump, hair._b, the same as it is. Export. Recently used, Ralph. C program files, x86 for 64-bit guys, Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Source Element, Game, User Mod, Materials, Models, Ralph, which is where we want it to go. And we can just, oops, Ralph, and we're going to call this hair_b for bump and VTF.vtf. Export. Add the alpha channel. Okay. Next one is the hair specular. File, export. Recently used, Ralph. And just change the extension to VTF. Add the alpha channel. Okay. Next one is the body. And what did we call that? Body. Uses the body texture, and the head as well uses the body texture, so we only have to save it once. So File, Export, and Recently Used, Ralph. We're going to change this to body.vtf. Export. Retain the alpha channel and say OK. This one will take a little bit longer because there's more materials for it to convert. Next one is the bump map, and we're going to call this one body bump .b_b. Export. Recently used, Ralph. Body_b for bump.vtf. Export. Retain the alpha channel. OK. This one will take a little bit of time as well. And the specular. File, export. Recently used, Ralph. And we want to change that to body_s.vtf. Export. Retain the alpha. OK. And that's it for GIMP. We're done with GIMP. Now what this is saying when you try to quit it is it wants to know if you want to save the actual GIMP project, and you can just say discard and close it down. We're finished with Blender. And now let's see where we are for time. 20 minutes. We're going to stop this video right now. and we'll carry on with building the VMT files in the next session. So with that, I say private jack out.